Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
You must wear only what my mother likes. My husband burned my new clothes in the grill at the summer house, and I turned him into a homeless man with a single phone call. Hello there. Create a cozy atmosphere for yourself, get comfortable, and welcome to the world of our stories. Carolina first noticed Damien at a corporate event hosted by American Standard, where she worked as a designer in the advertising department. He was representing a partner company and giving a presentation about the prospects of collaboration. Tall, with a neat haircut and a slightly oversized blue suit, he looked like a straight-A student who had accidentally ended up at a grown-up event. Carolina watched him over the rim of her martini glass, noticing how he nervously adjusted his tie whenever he lost his train of thought. "You know he's single and looking for a serious relationship," whispered her colleague Mariana, looking in the same direction. "And his salary is quite decent, too." Carolina just gave a dismissive chuckle. After breaking up with her previous boyfriend, she wasn't in a hurry to jump into a new relationship, and this guy looked far too proper, almost boring in his predictability. Later that evening, when most of the guests had already migrated to the bar, she bumped into him by the snack table. "I don't think those canapes are worth your attention," she said, watching him eye the sandwiches. "I saw how they were made. The olives came from a 3-day-old can." He looked confused and stared at her with such surprised eyes that she burst out laughing. "Just kidding. The canapes are great. I'm Carolina." "Damien," he said, shaking her hand awkwardly. That evening, they talked for 3 hours. Damien turned out not to be as boring as he had first seemed. He was a cybersecurity specialist and told her all about system hacks he'd read about in the news and how he'd bypassed school firewalls back in 8th grade. Carolina liked listening to his voice, quiet, with a slight rasp, as if he had just woken up. Their romance developed quickly. Carolina, usually reserved when it came to feelings, suddenly found herself waiting for his calls, rearranging her schedule to see him, and even started cooking, something she had always refused to do for any man. She liked his gentleness, his tact, his attention to detail. He remembered how she took her coffee, always arrived on time, and by the third date already knew the names of all her friends. "You're like a mix of a tank's reliability and a 19th century poet's romanticism," she once told him after a passionate night. He blushed and said he was just trying to be attentive. 6 months later, Damien proposed. It was raining that evening, they were coming back from the movies and decided to stop by a cafe. He pulled out a small box when the desserts arrived, and she didn't even realize at first that it was a ring. But when she did, she suddenly burst into tears, even though she never thought of herself as sentimental. They decided to have a modest wedding, nothing extravagant. Carolina didn't want to spend money on a lavish celebration. She had been saving for years for some big purchases. Part of the money was intended for a wardrobe refresh and new furniture for her apartment. The one-bedroom apartment in the city center had been passed down to her from her grandmother, and Carolina had invested a lot of effort and money into making it cozy. "I could rent us a place," Damien suggested a week before the wedding. "I don't want you thinking I'm marrying you for your apartment." Carolina just laughed. "Come on, I know you're not that kind of guy. Besides, my place is conveniently located. It'll take you 20 minutes on foot to get to work instead of an hour and 2 buses." Carolina met his mother 2 days before the wedding. Dolores Estrella Moreno lived in a dacha in the suburbs and only came into town for the celebration itself, citing health issues. She turned out to be a short woman with thin, pursed lips and dull hair pulled tightly into a bun. "Finally, I thought my son was hiding his bride from me," she said instead of a greeting, giving Carolina a full head-to-toe scan. Carolina was wearing her favorite off-shoulder red dress that flattered her figure. Her mother-in-law's gaze lingered on the neckline, and Carolina could almost hear a disapproving cluck. "Mama lives outside the city, at the dacha," Damien explained, glancing at Carolina in a way she didn't quite understand. "It's her only residence. Dad passed away 5 years ago, and she moved there permanently. Sold the apartment so my son could get a proper education," added Dolores Estrella in a tone that left no room for discussion. "No regrets. I raised a real man." The evening passed in a tense atmosphere. Dolores Estrella asked about Carolina's family, her job, whether she could cook, and how she planned to manage the household. Then she launched into memories of Damien's childhood, what illnesses he had, how hard it was to raise him alone after his father died. "I sacrificed everything for him," she repeated more than once. "Damien is my whole life." Damien sat with his eyes downcast, sometimes offering a nervous smile when his mother shared especially embarrassing stories from his childhood. Carolina noticed how he seemed to change around his mother, quieter, more reserved, as if he turned back into the shy little boy she was describing. After the wedding, Damien moved into Carolina's apartment. The first few weeks of living together were full of domestic discoveries. He liked sleeping with the window open even in winter. She preferred quiet breakfasts. He left socks around the place. She left cups in every room. But they quickly adapted, finding compromises. Dolores Estrella called every day, sometimes more than once, asking about her son's health, what he had for breakfast, reminding him to take his vitamins. Carolina winced but tolerated it. After all, it was his mother. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Damien casually said, "Carrie, I gave Mom a key to our apartment. You know, just in case. You never know." Carolina, who was applying night cream at that moment, froze with her hand on her face. "You did what?" "I gave her a spare set," he repeated. "She lives outside the city. What if she's in town and needs a place to stay? Or doesn't feel well? You don't mind, do you?" "I do," Carolina said slowly, feeling a wave of outrage rise inside her. "Damien, this is my apartment. I didn't give anyone permission to have keys. You should have asked me first." Damien looked surprised. "But it's my mom. I thought it was obvious." "Nothing is obvious when it comes to my personal space," Carolina snapped. "I'd prefer it if you took the keys back from her." Damien frowned, and in his eyes appeared something new, something Carolina hadn't seen before: stubbornness. "I don't think that's right. Mom will be really hurt." "And what about my feelings?" Carolina raised her voice. "I don't want anyone to be able to enter my home when I'm not there." "That's not anyone, that's my mother." Damien was raising his voice now too. "You're overreacting. It's not like she's going to come over all the time." Carolina felt that any further argument would be pointless. She silently finished her routine and got into bed, turning her back to her husband. That night, for the first time, they slept on opposite sides of the bed. The keys stayed with Dolores Estrella. A week later, Carolina came home from work earlier than usual and found her mother-in-law in the kitchen. She was making stew and looked entirely at ease, as if she were in her own home. Damianito called, said he'd be late. Dolores Estrella informed her instead of saying hello. "And your fridge was practically empty." "I had to go to the store." Carolina walked silently to the bedroom, changed clothes, and returned to the kitchen. "Dolores, next time, please let me know in advance when you plan to come over," she said in the calmest tone she could manage. "Why?" Her mother-in-law was chopping onions so forcefully that the knife hit the cutting board like a machine gun. "I'm Damien's mother. I have every right to visit my son whenever I want." "I'm not arguing with that," Carolina replied, "but this is my home, and I'd like to know who's here and when." Dolores Estrella put the knife down and turned to Carolina. "Sweetheart, don't start something you'll regret." Her voice was quiet, but there was steel behind it. "I will always be part of my son's life, always. And if you think your little apartment changes anything, you're deeply mistaken." That evening, for the first time, Carolina felt that their marriage might not be as smooth as she had hoped. From that day on, Dolores Estrella started coming over regularly. Sometimes Carolina would catch her cleaning. Her mother-in-law rearranged items, changed the order of things on the shelves, moved furniture around. When Carolina tried to say something, she just brushed her off. "I'm only trying to help. Everything here is so disorganized." One day, Carolina came home and found that her favorite ceramic figurines were missing from the living room shelf. In their place were heavy crystal vases. "What is this?" she asked Damien, who was already home. "Oh, Mom brought those," he shrugged. "She said your figurines were too frivolous, and these vases are family heirlooms." "And where are my figurines?" "I don't know, Mom probably put them somewhere." Carolina found her things packed in a box on the balcony. 2 of the figurines were broken. "Damien, this has gone too far," Carolina said, holding the shards in her hands. "Your mother is throwing out my things." "I'm sure it was an accident," Damien said, nervously adjusting his collar. "Mom would never." "Open your eyes." "She comes over uninvited, moves my things around, criticizes my taste, my clothes, the way I run the house." "You're exaggerating," Damien muttered, looking away. "Mom just wants to help. She has more experience with family life. I don't need her help. I want you to take the keys back from her." "We've already talked about this." Damien's voice turned cold. "I'm not taking the keys away from my mother." Carolina realized she was losing this battle. She started noticing things being moved around the apartment when she wasn't home, her makeup rummaged through, her favorite shoes shoved into the back of the closet. One day, she found Dolores flipping through their family photo album. Her mother-in-law sat on the couch, carefully studying their wedding photos. "This dress is far too revealing," she commented without looking up. "Inappropriate for a bride." "Dolores, you came over unannounced again," Carolina said, trying to keep her voice even. "And you're in those vulgar jeans again," the mother-in-law shot back, eyeing her outfit. "When are you going to start dressing like a married woman?" "And how exactly should I dress?" Carolina crossed her arms. "Modestly," Dolores Estrella said curtly. "Not like a," she trailed off meaningfully. Carolina felt herself nearing the breaking point. "Please leave. I have work to do." "And this is the thanks I get for organizing your closets?" Dolores Estrella pursed her lips. "I saw your wardrobe. All those short skirts and sheer blouses, a waste of money. And who are you dressing up for, anyway?" Carolina silently walked to the door and flung it open. "Goodbye, Dolores." That evening, she tried once again to talk to Damien. "Your mother is going through my things. She digs through my wardrobe, sorts through my makeup, criticizes everything I do. Damien, this is not normal." "Carrie, let's not fight," he said, pulling her into a conciliatory hug. "Mom just worries about us. She's lonely out there at the dacha." "Then why don't you visit her more often? Why does she keep coming here?" "But we're family now." Damien looked genuinely puzzled. "Isn't it natural that my mother cares about our home?" Carolina realized the conversation was going nowhere again. She decided to change the locks, but didn't get the chance. That Friday, she stayed late at work, preparing a presentation for an important client. She came home tired but pleased. The project had been approved, she'd received a thank you from the team and a promise of a bonus. In her mind, she was already making a list of new clothes to buy with the extra money. Carolina opened the door to her apartment and froze. In the hallway stood Damien, his eyes blank and his smile guilty. And behind him, seated on the couch in the living room, was Dolores, looking as though she had just won a major battle. Carolina's workdays always started the same: wake up at 6:30, a contrast shower, a strong cup of black coffee, and 20 minutes for makeup. She had been working at American Standard for 5 years and valued her reputation as a talented designer. Her projects always stood out, bright, creative, with an unconventional approach, and clients often requested her specifically. "Carolina, you've got a golden eye," her boss Antonio Ramos would say whenever one of her projects landed the company a lucrative contract. Her style was another reason she was respected at the office. Carolina always looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. She didn't skimp on clothes, favoring high-quality items from well-known brands. She had a personal system: a third of her salary went to clothes and accessories, a third to household needs, and a third into savings. By the time she turned 30, she had built a wardrobe any fashionista in the city would envy. Her shoe collection occupied an entire cabinet, 20 pairs of stiletto pumps in every color imaginable, ankle boots, tall boots, sandals, and ballet flats for particularly tough days. And the dresses. Each one had been chosen with care. She'd try on dozens before settling on the one that perfectly flattered her figure. Carolina especially loved bold designs, open backs, deep necklines, high slits in the skirts. Her favorite was a red dress by an Argentine designer, custom made for her 29th birthday. It hugged her waist, framed her shoulders beautifully, and had cost half a month's salary. That morning, she put on an emerald green sheath dress with black 10-centimeter stilettos. When she stepped out of the bedroom, Damien, who was making breakfast in the kitchen, froze with a spatula in hand. "Wow," he said, looking her up and down. "You look incredible." Carolina smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "It's just a good day. Presentation for Techno Latina, remember? Got to make an impression." Damien placed a plate of omelet in front of her. "Mom called yesterday," he said casually, not meeting her eyes. "Asked if she could come over for the weekend." Carolina slowly set her fork down. "And what did you say?" "Well, I told her I needed to check with you, but really, what's there to discuss? She's my mom." "Damien," Carolina tried to stay calm, "we've talked about this. I don't mind seeing your mother, but only when it's planned. I don't want her just showing up whenever she feels like it." "Oh, come on," he waved it off. "You're exaggerating. She just wants to help." "Help?" Carolina felt a surge of irritation rising. "Then why is she constantly criticizing everything I do? Why does she move my things around? Why does she comment on my clothes, my work, my habits?" Damien frowned. "She's just concerned. That's normal." "No, Damien, it's not normal. This is my apartment, my life, and I don't want someone telling me how to live it." She stood up from the table without touching her omelet. "I don't want to be late. See you tonight." On the way to work, Carolina tried to calm down. Maybe she was overreacting. After all, Dolores was a lonely woman living out in the country. She was probably just bored. But each time Carolina came home to find signs of her mother-in-law's presence, rearranged belongings, dishes washed without asking, the strange scent of mothballs in the closets, she felt her boundaries violated, as if someone had invaded her private space. The day at the office went well, the presentation was a hit, and the client was satisfied. On her way home, Carolina was thinking that she really needed to have a serious talk with Damien and set clear boundaries once and for all. The moment she opened the apartment door, she noticed a smell, a mix of gazpacho and some old perfume. Pots clanged in the kitchen. "Damien," she called out, though she already knew the answer. Dolores peeked out from the kitchen, wearing Carolina's apron. "Oh, you're back," she said instead of a greeting. "I'm making gazpacho. Your fridge was emptier than the desert." Carolina slowly took off her coat and hung it on the rack. "Dolores, we didn't agree on you coming over." "What's there to agree on?" her mother-in-law called from the stove. "I'm Damien's mother. I can visit my son whenever I want." "But Damien isn't even home. He'll be here in half an hour. I called him." Carolina headed to the bedroom to change and froze in the doorway. The closet was wide open. Her clothes were neatly folded and stacked on the bed. "What is this?" She turned to Dolores, who had followed her. "I was organizing your wardrobe," Dolores replied calmly. "So much unnecessary stuff. Especially these so-called dresses." She gestured with disdain at a stack of Carolina's favorite outfits. "You're a married woman, yet you dress like," she trailed off meaningfully, but her eyes finished the sentence. Carolina felt a wave of anger rise inside her. "You have no right to touch my things. This is my clothing, my closet, my apartment." "Yes, yes, yours, yours, yours," Dolores mocked. "And what about your husband? How do you think he feels when people stare at his wife in those vulgar outfits, whispering behind his back?" "No one whispers. You're making that up." "Oh, sweetheart, You're so naive, her mother-in-law sighed. Men will never tell you the truth to your face. Damien is too polite to admit how ashamed he is of the way you look. Just then, the front door slammed. Damien had returned. He stopped at the bedroom door, looking from his wife to his mother, unsure what was happening. What's going on? Your mother went through my closet, Carolina said, pointing at the laid-out clothes. Without my knowledge. Without my permission. Damien turned to his mother. Mom? I was just helping clean up, Dolores shrugged. Figured I'd tidy the closet while I was at it. So much useless junk in there. Those short skirts, those see-through blouses. Damianito, tell me, is that really appropriate for your wife? Damien shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure of whose side to take. Mom, maybe you shouldn't have done it without asking. So you do think I dress inappropriately? Carolina cut in, feeling her heart race. No, of course not, he said quickly. Mom just meant well. Meant well? Carolina raised her voice. She's digging through my stuff, insulting my taste, and hinting that I look like a prostitute. I never said that, Dolores interjected, but her eyes said otherwise. Carrie, calm down. Damien tried to embrace her, but she pulled away. Don't touch me. I want your mother to leave. Now. What ingratitude! Dolores exclaimed. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, and this is how you thank me? I didn't ask you to do any of it. Carolina no longer hid her emotions. You keep showing up uninvited, touching my belongings, criticizing everything. Mom, maybe let's go to the kitchen. Damien took his mother by the arm. Let Carrie get changed. Once they left the room, Carolina closed the door and leaned against it. She felt as if she had been robbed, not of things, but of her right to personal space, to make her own decisions. She could hear Damien whispering to his mother in the kitchen, and Dolores responding in a sharp, metallic tone. Opening the closet, Carolina discovered that all her favorite dresses had been pushed to the far end, and hanging front and center were unfamiliar garments, shapeless sweaters, and ankle-length skirts. Where did this come from, she thought, flipping through the strange clothes. Then it hit her. Dolores had brought her own clothes and hung them in Carolina's closet. That was the final straw. Carolina grabbed the clothes and stormed into the kitchen. What is this? She threw the clothing on the floor. You brought your things into my home? Dolores didn't even turn from the stove. This is decent clothing for a married woman. I figured you didn't have any, so I brought my old things. They're not flashy like your outfits, but they're modest and practical. Take them and leave. Carolina felt like she was about to explode. Carrie, come on, why are you being like this? Damien tried to intervene. Mom meant well. Meant well, she turned to him. Seriously? She comes over without asking, rummages through my things, brings her old junk and hangs it in my closet, and you're telling me she meant well? Don't raise your voice at my son, Dolores cut in sharply. It's not his fault you don't know how to be a proper wife. In the silence that followed, the bubbling sound of something simmering on the stove was clearly audible. Carolina slowly turned her gaze toward her mother-in-law. Get out of my house, she said quietly but firmly. Right now. Carolina. Damien exclaimed. Did you hear me? She didn't take her eyes off Dolores. Let her leave and take her junk with her. Dolores Estrella turned off the stove and slowly took off the apron. Fine, I'll leave. But remember, Damien is my son. And no matter what you do, that will never change. Once the door closed behind her, Carolina turned to her husband. I want you to take her keys back. Today. Carrie, don't overreact. Damien tried to take her hand, but she pulled it away. Either you get the keys back, or I'm changing the locks. Your choice. After a long argument, Damien finally agreed to talk to his mother. He came home late that night, gloomy and defeated. Well? Carolina asked, without looking up from her laptop. I talked to her. Damien sat on the edge of the bed. She was really upset. She said, "You hate her." "I don't hate her. I just want her to respect my boundaries." She promised not to come unannounced anymore. Damien looked miserable. "But the keys." "Carrie, I couldn't do it." She cried. "She said I was betraying her, choosing you over her." Carolina closed her laptop. "So you didn't take the keys?" "I couldn't," he repeated. "You don't understand what it's like for her to be alone. After Dad died, I'm all she has left. And you don't understand what it's like for me when she invades my life and tries to reshape it." They went to bed in tense silence, turned away from each other. The next morning, Carolina immediately called a locksmith company. They promised to come in 3 days, no sooner. She was about to hang up when Damien snatched the phone from her hand. "Sorry, we've changed our mind," he said into the phone and hung up. "What are you doing?" Carolina stared at him, wide-eyed. "No need to change the locks," Damien said firmly. "Mom promised to warn us before coming. Let's give her a chance." Carolina wanted to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. For the first time, she saw that beneath Damien's mild and yielding exterior, there was someone else entirely, stubborn and immovable when it came to his mother. "Fine," she said after a pause. "One chance. But if she shows up uninvited again, I'm changing the locks. Period." At work, Carolina couldn't focus. It felt like something foreign had entered her life, something that made it hard to breathe. She had always prided herself on her independence, on building a life that reflected her own taste. And now some woman from the countryside was trying to tear it all down. That evening, she stayed late at the office finishing up a project. She came home after dark, tired but pleased with the result. As soon as she opened the door, she sensed something was wrong. The air smelled of mothballs and some old perfume. She hurried to the bedroom and flung open the closet, and froze. Her clothes were gone. In their place hung old dresses and sweaters that smelled of mothballs. "What the hell?" she whispered, frantically rummaging through the unfamiliar rags. Just then, Damien entered the room. He looked both confused and guilty. "Carrie, I can explain." "Where are my clothes?" She turned to him sharply. "What happened?" Damien started mumbling something about his mom, who came over with her key and organized things. Apparently, Carolina's outfits were too provocative for a married woman: short skirts, tight dresses, bold colors, all inappropriate. And stilettos? Only worn by women of questionable morals. Carolina listened in stunned disbelief. It felt like a surreal nightmare. Surely no one could have just taken all her clothes like that. But Damien kept talking, and the horror of it began to sink in. Dolores Estrella had packed up her entire wardrobe into bags and taken them to the dacha. There, they built a fire in an old metal barrel and burned everything. In their place, she had brought her own clothing: ancient shapeless dresses, ankle-length skirts, and sweaters in the color of wilted cabbage. "You burned my clothes?" Carolina's voice was cold, each word landing like a hammer. "Mom said it was for the best." Damien's voice grew quieter with every word. "She meant well." Carolina stared straight through him. "My red dress alone cost that much," she said, naming the price. "And you burned it." "Carrie, we'll get you a new dress." Damien stepped toward her. "Just not such a revealing one. Mom says." "I don't give a damn what your mom says." Carolina screamed. "She burned my clothes, my favorite dresses, my shoes, my blouses, everything I saved up for years." Damien kept trying to justify it. "Mom knows best how a respectable woman should dress. Now no one will stare or gossip anymore." At that moment, the intercom buzzed. Damien went to answer it while Carolina stood frozen in front of her empty closet, trying to process what had just happened. Her favorite clothes, her style, her identity, all turned to ash on the whim of some deranged old woman. Standing at the door was none other than Dolores herself, holding 2 more bags. She had brought even more old rags and was ready to deliver a lecture on proper living. She launched into a speech about feminine modesty and motherly wisdom. "You should be grateful I'm taking care of you," she said, laying another pile of shapeless clothes on the bed. "These things may be old, but they're high quality. Not like your rags. In these, you'll look like a respectable woman, not like." Carolina wasn't listening anymore. She silently walked into the kitchen and pulled out a brand new mop, an expensive one, with a telescopic handle and a washable head. Dolores kept rambling about morality, unaware that her daughter-in-law was creeping up behind her. Gripping the mop tightly, Carolina thought of her red dress, her favorite shoes, everything that made her her, now reduced to ashes. She looked at the back of Dolores, at her bony shoulders wrapped in a dated sweater, and felt a dark, uncontrollable wave of rage rise inside her. The first blow landed on the back of the head. Dolores gasped and tried to turn, but the second strike hit her squarely in the back. Carolina whipped her mother-in-law methodically, hitting every reachable part of her body, muttering incoherently through clenched teeth. "This is for my red dress," a blow to the shoulder. "This is for my shoes," the mop came down on her back. "And this is for invading my life." The final hit made Dolores stumble. Dolores tried to shield herself, but Carolina was faster. Years of fitness training paid off. Her mother-in-law screamed in a voice not her own. "Damianito, help! She's trying to kill me." Damian rushed in to defend his mother and caught the mop handle full force in the solar plexus. He doubled over and collapsed to the floor, gasping like a fish out of water. The mop cracked against his head and split in two. "You!" Carolina pointed the broken handle at him like a weapon. "You let this happen. Traitor!" She hurled the pieces aside and began throwing Dolores's rags out the window. She flung the window wide open and started tossing out skirts and sweaters, ignoring Dolores's screams. "You're insane!" Dolores shrieked, trying to grab her belongings. "Damian, she's completely lost it." Down below, neighbors looked up in astonishment as clothes rained down from the fourth floor. Then a disheveled woman leaned out of the window and shouted for people to take the stuff for free. One old lady was the first to rush in and collect the freebies. "Take it all. Free of charge," Carolina yelled, throwing out another armful. Straight from a Spanish mother-in-law's heart. "Stop it." Dolores grabbed her arm. "Those are my things." "And where are mine?" Carolina turned to her with a face twisted in fury. "Where are my things, the ones you burned?" "They were inappropriate," Dolores insisted. "I was protecting my son's reputation." "Reputation?" Carolina burst out laughing so loudly that Damian flinched. "What reputation? Rags wrapped around him like a cocoon?" She grabbed her mother-in-law by the shoulders and pushed her into the hallway. Dolores resisted, clinging to the furniture, but Carolina was stronger. Adrenaline gave her power. "Carolina, wait," Damian finally got up from the floor, holding his head. "Let's talk." "About what?" She turned on him. "About how you and your mommy torched my wardrobe? Or how you let her take over my home?" She yanked open the front door and shoved Dolores onto the landing. The older woman lost her balance and landed on her backside with a loud thud. "Get out!" Carolina slammed the door in her face. Damian rushed toward the door. "Mom, are you okay?" Carolina blocked his path. "Where are you going?" "Running to Mommy?" "You've lost your mind," he said, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You hit my mother. And you burned my clothes," she jabbed a finger into his chest. "Clothes I saved up for over years. Things that cost more than your whole damn dacha." There was a loud thud at the door. Dolores was pounding on it with her fists, demanding her son be let out. Carolina stormed into the bedroom, threw Damian's things into a duffel bag, and came back to the hallway. "Here," she tossed the bag at him. "Get out. You and your mommy, both of you." "Carolina, let's just calm down," Damian tried to reason with her, though his voice trembled. "We'll fix this. We'll buy you new clothes, better than the old ones." Out, she shouted, throwing the door wide open. Outside, Dolores was still wailing. She's insane. She attacked me with a weapon. Damianito, call the police. Damian looked lost, shifting his gaze from his mother to his wife and back again. Carrie, let's just talk this through, he tried again. I understand you're upset. Upset? Carolina laughed bitterly. You understand nothing. Get out. And take your crazy mother with you. She shoved his bag out onto the landing. Dolores wouldn't give up and tried to force the door open with her shoulder. Aunt Rosa, the neighbor, had had enough and called the police. 15 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez was climbing the stairs, wiping sweat from his forehead. The elevator, as usual, wasn't working. All right, what's going on here? He asked, surveying the strange scene, a man with a bleeding head sitting on the floor, a woman in old-fashioned clothes fussing beside him, and a disheveled young woman peeking from behind the door. She attacked us. Dolores screamed, pointing at Carolina. With a weapon. She tried to kill us. With what weapon? The officer asked tiredly, clearly used to domestic disputes. With a mop. Dolores said dramatically, rubbing her shoulder. I'll have bruises. A mop? Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. That's not a weapon, Senora. She kicked us out of the apartment, Dolores insisted. We only wanted to help. To make her a respectable woman. And you are. Rodriguez turned to Damian. I'm her husband, he muttered, still clutching his head. And you, the officer looked at Dolores. I'm his mother. And I have every right. No, you don't, Rodriguez cut her off. If the apartment isn't yours, you have no legal rights to it. But my son lives there. Whose name is on the property? Rodriguez asked, turning to Carolina. Mine, she replied firmly. I owned it before the marriage. And I want to file a report for unlawful entry and destruction of property. Destruction? Rodriguez frowned. They burned all my clothes, Carolina pointed at her mother-in-law. She took my entire wardrobe to the dacha and burned it in a barrel. Then brought her old rags as replacements. Is that true? Rodriguez looked at Damian. He lowered his eyes and mumbled something. Louder, please. Yes, Damian finally admitted. But we meant well. Her clothes were too provocative for a married woman. Rodriguez shook his head. Unbelievable, man. That's a criminal offense, destruction of personal property. A criminal offense? Dolores snapped. We're family. We were protecting her reputation. Let's go down to the station, Rodriguez sighed. We'll sort this out there. They spent 2 long hours at the police station. Carolina calmly and clearly laid out the situation, how Dolores got the keys from Damian without her consent, how she kept coming over uninvited, criticized her clothes, and eventually destroyed her entire wardrobe. There was a very expensive dress, she said, looking the desk officer directly in the eyes. Designer shoes, blouses, skirts, accessories, all worth around $500,000. $500,000 for clothes? Dolores snapped. Who would want those vulgar outfits anyway? I did, Carolina shot back. They were mine. Bought with my own money. You had no right to touch them. Dolores tried to argue, threatening lawsuits. Damian stayed silent, eyes on the floor, occasionally casting pleading glances at his wife. The officer explained the seriousness of the situation. With that amount of damages, it's a criminal case. The statute on intentional property destruction carries a fine up to $70,000 or correctional labor. And since it's within a family, it could go to court. After long negotiations, and on the condition that Carolina agreed not to press charges if compensated for the damage, they reached a settlement. Damian and Dolores committed to paying her the money within 1 month. Carolina also insisted that Damian return all keys to the apartment. All of them, she emphasized, looking directly at Dolores. Yours and hers. But what about me? Damian asked helplessly. Where am I supposed to live? Not my problem, Carolina replied coldly. Go live with mommy at the dacha. Dolores turned pale with rage. You can't do this to my son. You're a family. We were, Carolina said, taking the keys from Damien. Not anymore. She went home alone. The apartment felt strangely empty and quiet. Carolina walked through each room, opened the closet. It was bare. Not a single thing of hers, just some faded rags that reeked of mothballs. She gathered them all and stuffed them into a large trash bag. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Carolina allowed herself to cry for the first time that crazy day. Not for the lost clothes, but for the broken hopes, the betrayal, the realization that the man she trusted was too weak to protect even his own wife. In the morning, she called work and took a day off. Then she called a locksmith and had the locks changed. After that, she sat down at her computer and ordered a whole new wardrobe online, using everything she had on her card. If you don't mind, please take these with you, she said to the locksmith, pointing to the bag of Dolores's old rags. I won't be needing them anymore. The repairman simply shrugged and took the bag. On the way home, he tossed it into a dumpster. When the doorbell rang that evening, Carolina already knew who it was. She opened it and saw Damien, disheveled, with a black eye and a guilty smile. Carrie, can we talk? He began. I get it. You're upset. Upset? Carolina looked at him like he was an idiot. You really think I'm just upset? I was wrong, he spread his hands. I shouldn't have given Mom the keys. I shouldn't have let her do any of it. And now what? I talked to her. I explained she crossed the line. She won't interfere in our lives anymore, I promise. Carolina crossed her arms. And you believed her? She's my mother, Damien said, looking her in the eye. Of course I believe her. She admitted she was wrong. And you? Do you admit you were wrong too? Yes, he nodded. I should have protected you. I'm sorry. Carolina stared at him silently, trying to find even a glimmer of understanding in his eyes, but all she saw was a desperate desire to smooth things over and return to their old life. You know what's the worst part, she finally said. Not that she burned my things, but that you let her. You stood there and watched as my dresses, my shoes, everything I'd spent years collecting, went up in flames. Carrie, No, she raised a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. You chose her over me. You always have. And you always will, because you have no backbone. You're an extension of your mother, not your own man. That's not true, Damien raised his voice. I love you. Maybe, Carolina shrugged, but not enough to respect me. Give me another chance, he reached for her hand, but she stepped back. I'll fix everything. We'll buy you new clothes, even better than before. I already did, she nodded toward the boxes in the hallway. With my money. And guess what? They're even brighter, even shorter, even more provocative than the last ones. Damien's face fell. But why? Mom said. There it is. Carolina pointed at him triumphantly. Mom said. You still don't get it. She started to close the door, but he held it with his hand. Wait. What do I do? How do I prove I'm on your side? You don't, Carolina shook her head. You already made your choice. And I've made mine. A week later, Carolina filed for divorce. The court quickly settled the division of property. The apartment was awarded to her as premarital property, and they had virtually no joint assets. Damien tried to contest the ruling, arguing he had contributed to the renovations, but Carolina provided documentation proving she'd paid for everything herself. At the final hearing, Dolores Estrella caused a scene, yelling that Carolina had destroyed their family, that she was ungrateful and heartless, that she'd used her son for his apartment. And then she threw him out into the street, she sobbed, turning to the judge. Where is he supposed to go? He has nothing. He has a mother, Carolina replied calmly. And a dacha. Isn't that where you burned my clothes? After the court, Damien tried to speak with her one more time. Carrie, maybe we could try again? I've rented an apartment. I'm living away from Mom. She really understands now. No, Carolina shook her head. We're different people, Damien. We want different things from life. I want to be with you, he grabbed her hand. Isn't that enough? It's not, she pulled her hand away. Because you want to be with me on your terms. And I don't want to be with you at all. Damien returned to his mother at the dacha, where they spent their days discussing the cruelty of modern women and the tragedy of maternal love. Dolores Estrella cooked him stews and cutlets, washed his shirts, and comforted him with the promise that someday he'd find a real woman who appreciated his kindness and decency. They're all the same, she'd say, ladling out gazpacho. Ungrateful. Obsessed with clothes and entertainment. Not like in our time. Damien nodded in agreement. But sometimes, as he stared out the window at the falling autumn leaves, he realized he hadn't just lost a wife, vibrant, fiery, with a spirit of her own. He'd lost his chance to become an independent man. To break free from his mother's shadow. To build a life of his own. Meanwhile, Carolina was settling into her refreshed apartment. She bought a new wardrobe, brighter and bolder than ever before. And a new mop, just in case. Occasionally, she thought about her short-lived marriage and smiled. It had been a valuable lesson. Now, she knew exactly what she wanted from life and from love. Sometimes she thought about the fire where her favorite things had burned. That blaze hadn't just consumed dresses and shoes. It had burned away her naivety, her willingness to conform, her need to meet others' expectations. And for that, she was grateful. But Dolores Estrella wasn't the kind to admit defeat easily. After the court, once the divorce papers were signed, she decided the final word should be hers. That same evening, she returned to Carolina's building and spent a long time circling the entrance, waiting for the right moment. She was lucky. Carolina was just returning from work with several large shopping bags. Her new wardrobe needed accessories, and she wasn't holding back. Upon seeing her former mother-in-law, Carolina instinctively clutched the bags to her chest. "What do you want?" she asked, stopping a few meters away. "We have nothing to discuss anymore." "I wanted to look into the eyes of the homewrecker," Dolores said, folding her arms, "the one who ruined my son's life." "Homewrecker?" Carolina couldn't help but laugh. "I didn't break anyone up. On the contrary, I reunited a mother with her little boy. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "Don't get smart," Dolores took a step forward. "Do you think I don't see through your games? You lured Damien into your apartment and then threw him out. It was all part of your plan." Carolina shook her head. "You still don't get it. You destroyed our marriage with your constant interference, your toxicity, your obsessive attachment to your son." "Big words," Dolores hissed. "Been reading your Little Women's magazines? Toxicity, boundaries. Back in my day, we respected our elders and listened to their advice." "Well, your day is over," Carolina said, heading toward the entrance. "And so is this conversation." "Wait," Dolores grabbed her by the elbow, "I'm not finished." "Well, I am," Carolina shook off her hand. "Don't touch me." "Damien is suffering," Dolores' tone softened. "He still loves you, despite everything you've done. If he really loved me, he would have protected me from you." "From me?" Dolores clutched her chest theatrically. "I only wanted what's best. Those vulgar outfits were humiliating him in front of colleagues, friends." "That's enough," Carolina turned sharply. "I'm not interested. Not in you, not in your advice, not in your son. I have a new life now, and there's no room in it for people like you." She entered the building, but Dolores followed. "You'll regret this," she shouted, climbing the stairs behind Carolina. "No one will ever love someone like you. All you care about is money and clothes." Neighbors peeked out their doors at the noise. Carolina quickly made her way up to her floor, opened her door, and shut it firmly in her former mother-in-law's face. Open up. Dolores pounded on the door. We're not finished. I'm calling the police, Carolina said loudly through the door. Right now. Dolores banged a little more, shouting threats, but eventually went silent. Carolina leaned against the door, catching her breath. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding. Just then, the doorbell rang. Carolina tensed, but when she looked through the peephole, she saw her neighbor, Aunt Rosa. Carolina, are you all right? The elderly woman asked when Carolina opened the door. That witch came after you again. It's fine, Aunt Rosa, Carolina smiled. She left. I warned her I'd call the police. The neighbor adjusted her glasses. She's not the first one I've dealt with like that. My daughter-in-law once tried to run the household too, until I made it clear who was in charge. Carolina nodded gratefully. Aunt Rosa had been her neighbor for 10 years, and by now, they had a relationship that was almost familial. Would you like to come in for tea? Carolina offered. Another time, dear. I'm watching my show, Aunt Rosa lowered her voice. It's intense. The husband is cheating on the wife with her sister, and the wife knows but is waiting for the right moment to get revenge. Just like real life. Left alone, Carolina unpacked her purchases, new trousers, a blouse, shoes, all bright, bold, and nothing that Dolores Estrella would ever approve of. The thought made Carolina smile. Now she could wear whatever she liked, without anyone's judgment. Her phone rang while she was in the shower. She didn't answer, but later saw 3 missed calls from Damien. A message followed. We need to talk. It's important. Carolina deleted the message without replying. Whatever Damien had to say, it no longer mattered. Their marriage had been a mistake, one she had already corrected. The next day at work, her boss Antonio Ramos called her into his office. Carolina, is everything all right? He asked when she stepped in. Yes, everything's fine, she answered cautiously. Why? Your ex-husband came to see me, the director said awkwardly. He was saying some strange things, that you're unstable, that you have anger issues. What? Carolina couldn't believe her ears. He actually came to you with that? Yes, and he wasn't alone, Antonio rubbed the bridge of his nose. He brought an older woman. I assume his mother. She was even more insistent. Claimed you attacked him with a weapon. A mop. Carolina couldn't help but smirk. After they burned all my clothes. She briefly explained the story of her failed marriage. Antonio listened carefully, occasionally shaking his head. Damn, he said when she finished. So, what are you going to do now? Keep living, Carolina shrugged. What else can I do? I mean, they might not stop. Your ex hinted he's planning to file a claim about joint property, something about contributing to the renovations. Let him try, Carolina smiled. I have every receipt. Every single purchase is documented. Antonio Ramos exhaled in relief. Good. I wouldn't want to lose such a valuable employee over personal issues. You won't, Carolina said confidently. But the problems didn't end there. That same evening, Carolina discovered someone had keyed her car in the parking lot. A long scratch stretched from the headlight to the rear bumper, as if someone had dragged a key along it. On the dusty windshield, someone had written the word slut. Any cameras? Asked Officer Rodriguez, who had responded to the call, scanning the parking area. Only at the entrance, Carolina pointed toward the gate. But that section of the lot isn't covered. Someone from your past? Rodriguez jotted notes into his notepad. Possibly, Carolina remembered her morning meeting with the director. My ex-husband and his mother. They have it out for me. The same two who caused the scene in your building last time? Rodriguez looked up. The very same. It'll be hard to prove, he closed the notebook. No witnesses, no camera footage. We'll file a report, but don't expect fast results. Carolina nodded. She hadn't counted on the police anyway. Petty revenge usually goes unpunished. Sitting in her scratched car, she felt a new kind of fatigue, not physical, but emotional. Like an invisible weight pressing down on her shoulders. The divorce was supposed to bring her freedom, but instead, it had brought new problems. At home, another surprise was waiting. The door was slightly ajar. Carolina tensed, pulled out the pepper spray she'd bought after everything that had happened, and carefully entered the apartment. Inside, everything was turned upside down. Clothes were scattered, closets were open, drawers pulled out and dumped onto the floor. But nothing was missing, not the laptop, not the cash she kept in a jewelry box. This wasn't theft. It was revenge. On the hallway mirror, the word slut was scrawled in lipstick. Carolina called the police again. Officer Rodriguez returned, walking through the apartment, photographing the mess and asking questions. "Did you change the locks recently?" he asked, inspecting the door. "Yes, right after the divorce." "No sign of forced entry," he noted. "So someone has a key." "Impossible," Carolina shook her head. "I changed all the locks. Only I have the keys." "Could someone have made a duplicate before the divorce?" Rodriguez suggested. Carolina paused. Damien could have made a copy for his mother without telling her. Or Dolores could have done it herself. She'd come to the apartment countless times when Carolina wasn't home. "Possible," she said finally. "But then it would have had to be before the locks were changed." "I'll speak to your ex-husband," Rodriguez said, noting down Dolores Estrella's address. "Maybe we'll get something out of him." After the police left, Carolina began cleaning up. The task helped distract her. Repetitive movement was oddly soothing. While picking up scattered belongings, she came across a photograph, her and Damien's wedding photo, the frame shattered. The glass had cracked perfectly down the middle, symbolically dividing what was already broken. Carolina stared at it for a while, then decisively tossed it into the trash. The past should stay in the past. The next day, Rodriguez called to report the outcome of his conversation with Damien and his mother. "They deny everything," he said. "Claim they haven't come near your apartment since the divorce. They have an alibi. They were at a relative's birthday party out of town. Several people can confirm it." "And now what?" Carolina felt a wave of despair rise inside her. "My advice is to install a camera at your door," Rodriguez sighed. "And maybe consider staying with friends or family for a while." "I'm not running from my own apartment," Carolina said firmly. "I'll install a camera, change the locks again, and move on with my life." That same day, she contacted a security company. A young technician quickly installed a motion-detecting camera and set up the app on her phone. "You'll get an alert if anyone approaches the door," he explained. "Footage is stored in the cloud, so even if the camera is destroyed, the video will remain." Carolina thanked him and paid generously. Safety was worth every penny. That evening, her friend Mariana, the one who had introduced her to Damien at that corporate event, called. "How are you?" she asked with concern. "I heard about the divorce." "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to burden anyone," Carolina sighed. "And there's not much to say. Just didn't work out. Or rather, didn't work out with the mother-in-law." "I can imagine," Mariana snorted. "I still remember how she looked at you at the wedding, like you stole her last piece of candy." "More like her last man," Carolina said bitterly. They chatted a bit longer, and Carolina felt lighter. Sometimes, all you need is someone to talk to lift the weight off your chest. Work was going well. After the success of the Techno Latina project, she was promoted to senior designer. The new role meant more money and more creative freedom. Carolina threw herself into her work, trying not to dwell on her personal problems. But the harassment didn't stop. Someone subscribed her work email to dozens of spam lists. Her work phone started getting strange calls, sometimes just silence, sometimes heavy breathing. And one morning, she found a pile of trash dumped right at her apartment door, as if someone had emptied a garbage can directly onto her welcome mat. The camera caught only a shadow. Whoever it was knew about the surveillance and stayed hidden around the corner, acting quickly and deliberately. This has gone too far, Carolina told Officer Rodriguez after calling him again following yet another incident. What am I supposed to do now? Move? Change jobs? Change my name? Maybe you should talk to them? Rodriguez suggested. Sometimes a direct conversation works better than anything else. Talk to whom? My ex-mother-in-law, who hates me with every fiber of her being. Or my ex-husband, who can't even protect himself. Rodriguez shrugged. Just a suggestion. What else is left? After he left, Carolina sat in silence for a long time, thinking. The officer was right, she had to do something. She couldn't live in fear forever, constantly looking over her shoulder and jumping at every sound. The next day, Carolina made up her mind. She took the day off from work and drove out to Dolores's country house. The drive took nearly an hour. The old summer community was far outside the city, surrounded by fields and patches of forest. The Moreno family's house turned out to be a solid two-story home with a well-tended garden. Clearly, someone was taking care of the place. The grass was trimmed, the paths swept, the flowers watered. Carolina parked by the gate and sat in her car for a few minutes, gathering her courage. Finally, she got out and pressed the doorbell with determination. Damien opened the door. He looked gaunt, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Seeing Carolina, he froze, his mouth slightly open. "Hi," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to talk." "Carolina?" He stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk." "Can I come in?" Damien hesitated, then stepped aside to let her into the house. Inside it was clean, but soulless, the typical interior of a lonely elderly woman, lace doilies on the dresser, faded photographs in frames, artificial flowers in vases. "Mom's not home," Damien said as he closed the door. "She's at the clinic, doctor's appointment." Even better, Carolina walked into the living room and sat down in an armchair. "I came to talk to you." Damien nervously ran a hand through his hair. "Tea? Coffee?" "Nothing." "Sit down." She pointed to the couch across from her. He sat, back rigid with tension. "I know it was you," Carolina began without preamble. "The scratches on my car, the break-in, the calls, the trash at my door, all of it came from you." "Carrie, I don't know what you're talking about," Damien shook his head. "We didn't." "Don't lie," she cut him off. "That's not why I'm here. I'm not looking for a confession or an apology. I came to tell you that this ends now." "What ends?" He looked confused. "Your war against me," Carolina leaned forward. "It stops here, or I will take you to court for harassment and psychological abuse. I've got security footage, police reports, witnesses. All I'm missing is direct evidence, and if you continue, I will get it." Damien turned pale. "Carrie, you've got it all wrong." "I got it exactly right," she didn't let him finish. "Your mother thinks I ruined your life and wants revenge. And you, as always, go along with whatever she says." "That's not true." "It doesn't matter," Carolina stood up. "Just pass on my message. If anything else happens, a scratch, a prank call, garbage at my door, I will sue. And believe me, I'll win. I can afford a good lawyer." She turned toward the door, but Damien grabbed her hand. "Wait, don't go. Let's talk this through." "There's nothing left to talk about," she pulled her hand away. "Just leave me alone." "I miss you," he said suddenly. "I think about you every day, about how I can fix everything." Carolina looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing can be fixed, Damien. It's too late." "I can change," his voice was desperate. "I already have. I've rented an apartment in the city. Got a new job." "Did you talk to your mom?" Carolina crossed her arms. "Did you explain to her that she has no right to interfere in your life?" Damien hesitated. "I tried, but she... You know what she's like." "Exactly," Carolina shook her head. Nothing's changed, and nothing will. At that moment, the door opened, and Dolores appeared on the threshold with a bag of groceries. "Oh my God," she gasped when she saw Carolina. "You? What are you doing here?" "I'm already leaving." Carolina headed for the exit. "Wait," Dolores blocked her way. "Why did you come? To mess with my son's head again?" "Mom, don't start." Damien tried to pull his mother aside, but she wouldn't budge. "I came to say that your antics will end in court if they don't stop," Carolina replied calmly. "Scratches on my car, the break-in, phone calls, all of that qualifies as a criminal offense." "What scratches? What break-in?" Dolores feigned surprise. "Are you out of your mind? We've got enough to deal with without you." "Mom, move." Damien finally pushed her aside. "I'll walk Carolina out." "No, you won't." Dolores grabbed her son's arm. "Let her get out. And don't you dare talk to her. She'll confuse you all over again." Damien looked torn, shifting his gaze from his mother to his ex-wife, unsure of who to listen to. "You see?" Carolina said quietly. "Nothing's changed, and it never will." She walked around Dolores and stepped outside. Behind her, she could hear the shouting of her ex-mother-in-law and Damien's mumbled protests. Carolina got into her car and started the engine. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Damien stood by the gate, watching her leave, while behind him his mother loomed, angrily scolding him. Poor guy, Carolina thought. He'll never escape that prison. On the way home, she reflected on the visit. It probably wouldn't change anything. Dolores Estrella wasn't the kind to back off. But now they knew Carolina wasn't going to quietly endure it anymore. She was ready to fight back. At home, she first checked the camera. Everything was working perfectly. Then she opened her closet. Her new clothes hung neatly, bright, stylish, chosen by her and not dictated by anyone else. After changing into her favorite emerald dress, Carolina felt a surge of strength. She wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was a strong, independent woman who decided for herself how to live and what to wear. Within a week, the harassment stopped. No more phone calls, no trash at the door, no scratches on her car. It seemed the threat of legal action had worked. A month later, Carolina learned from mutual acquaintances that Damien had finally moved out of his mother's house and rented an apartment in the city. Not long after, she ran into him at the mall. He was with a girl, modest-looking, wearing a long skirt and a plain blouse. When he saw Carolina, he nodded but didn't come over. Found someone Mommy would approve of, Carolina thought without bitterness. Well, good luck to them both. Life was getting better. Carolina got a promotion, bought a new car, and started spending more time with friends. Sometimes she thought about her failed marriage, but without resentment, more as a life lesson. One weekend, while cleaning out her storage room, Carolina came across a new mop, the same one she had bought after the divorce. She smiled, remembering how she had fought off Dolores with the old one. I should throw this out, she thought, looking at the untouched packaging. Why keep a reminder of the past? But then she changed her mind and set the mop back in place. Just in case, she said out loud. You never know. And she laughed, loudly, freely, from the heart, like someone who's been through a storm and is ready to move on without looking back.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.